So we talked about creating logical actions or functions in the last video, but there's a couple more concepts I need to teach you because you'll use them all the time. And quick side note, if you're like, why the crap is Erica creating this course again after like 3 months off? Well, it's because I'm pregnant. Yeah, so I was really sick the first 3 months and tired, and so yeah, I really appreciate your patience and allowing me to come back. Growing baby dev has been an endeavor. Now, there are two built-in concepts into a lot of different programming languages that help determine the action that a function is going to take on some data. And these two built-in concepts are if-else statements, which basically says, hey, if you see this thing, take this action, but if you see anything else, take that action. And the second built-in concept is the concept of loops, which basically says, hey, so long as some certain thing that we want to see is there, take this action. Keep running this function until you no longer see this thing being true or this thing being there. And Python has two types of loops, for loops and while loops. But as always, oh, I can't stand up. As always, the best way to learn any coding concept is to actually look at examples. So let's do that now. All right, and I'm gonna be real with you guys. I'm a little bit worried and self-conscious about doing a good job with this while pregnant. So if I go off the rails a little bit or you have other questions, let me know and I'll try to address them in the comments or the next video. But here's what we did last time, right? We talked about putting a day's uptime for two different switches, both with the data type of a float, which means it's a decimal point. And then we created our first function, right? And we talked about the structure of that function. And all I've done since is add this comment, which is not read by the developer environment. It's simply for the human reading the code so that they can understand what's going on. So I put find sum of days uptime for two switches. If any of that is new to you, you need to go back and watch my last video. Okay, and we also called that function, right? We called that function so that it would actually run, right? In the first part, we defined it. The second part, we actually bring it to life or call it. So now what I want to do is to create some functions that use these concepts that I'm trying to introduce to you, the if-else statement, and the concept of loops. And again, as I've said throughout the beginning of this course, because we have learned so little at this point, I'm going to have to use some nonsensical networking examples for these because I don't want to introduce things you've not yet been taught, so bear with me. So in my wisdom, to prevent the pregnancy brain, I did comment the first function that I want to write, which is pretending that when we have that firewall that is active, remember in the variables video, we created a firewall name for our firewall, and we also indicated whether or not the firewall was active, true or false. So what if we wanted to have a function that said, while this firewall is active, that we want to see any IPS events that come through that firewall? Again, we are going to oversimplify this for learning's sake. So let's start it with what we know, right? Let's start the function with the proper syntax. We always start with that def keyword. Then we're going to have to name this function. So maybe it's show IPS events. Again, this is a little bit subjective and it depends a little bit on what you're, writing or building here, but show IPS events I think is sufficient. We have to have those two parentheses, even if we're not expecting to pass anything into our logic. And then we end that line with a colon always. It's just how it is. How do we do this? If we need something to happen while a certain condition is true with this firewall, we can use a while loop. And that is simply using the while keyword, and then you indicate what the condition needs to be. And as long as this script is running, while the condition is true, it's going to execute whatever is below it. So I'm going to walk through this with you. Oh, sorry, I'm getting pregnancy brain. So while... And we get a squiggly line here, right? And that is because we have not defined this variable inside of this file. So kind of like how we defined our logic and then we called it, you also have to define a variable somewhere earlier in your script before you can actually use it somewhere. And we did create this variable, but it's in another file that this file doesn't know about, right? So let's recreate that variable just outside of here so that we have it. Firewall active equals true. Now here's something confusing. It is the default understanding that if you just put the variable like while firewall active, the default understanding is that it's while firewall active equals true. So if you can see when I put that colon there are no squiggly line errors, syntax errors, because it already assumes that. Now that would be a problem if I wanted the condition to be while firewall active equals false, right? I could not write this line of code. If I wanted to be explicit and say while firewall active is true, I'm going to have to use two equal signs because you see that I got a red squiggly here, right? And this is because this is me creating a variable, right? And we're not creating a variable. We want to check whether or not this variable is true. And so we introduce a new operator. If you Google it, it's called the equality operator. But basically, when you have one equal sign, you're saying, hey, firewall active refers to this value, which is true. In this line, on line 17, where we said while firewall active equals true, we are saying while firewall active holds this exact value. So we are checking a value and saying if it equals exactly this, then the condition is true. Again, I know this is a little bit confusing, right? It's something you have to get used to, but the one equal sign is just showing what a variable is referring to, right? It can change. Equals is doing that check where it says, hey, does it actually equal this certain value, right? I could put anything after this equals sign. I could put false, I could put blueberries. It doesn't matter. This equals is just doing a check to see, does it contain this thing that I'm checking that it contains? So let's put back the true. So while firewall active equals true, and then we're gonna indent it again, right? Because that is basically how you show that something is happening within something. So if you can see, we defined our function with the def, and then because this while loop is happening within the function, it's indented, and now we have something happening within the while loop, being executed within the while loop, and so we indent yet again. And Python's weird about spaces too, so just keep that in mind. I'm not gonna talk about that more in this video, but it's picky about spacing. So while firewall active equals true, we would have the logic to show IPS events. Now, in a few videos from now, you could actually implement the real logic that could pull these IPS events from your firewall and actually make a working function. But because this is just a demonstration and we have not learned that yet, we're just going to do a print statement that says, here are the IPS events. And this is just so that you can logically understand the while loop, even though we're not implementing. So what that means is that if firewall active ever becomes not true or false, then you will not see this print statement. And keep in mind, we've written here in the code that firewall active equals true, but in real world coding, we would not just put that value directly into the code. We'd be pulling that information from somewhere so that if it changes, if the status of the firewall changes, our script would know that and could act accordingly. Also remember that typically we end our function with a return statement for what we want to come out of this function and to be used later on in the program. But because we're just doing a print statement and not the real thing, I'm going to not include that here because it just doesn't make any sense, all right? We're just printing something to the console. We're not giving information elsewhere in the program. So there is that function, and let's go ahead and go up to the top right and hit the play button and run it. Oh, and it did not run, right? It just shows the sum of the days uptime. And why didn't it run? Because we didn't call it. So we defined the function here, now we need to call it. So show, we do that by putting the name of the function and then the parentheses, and if there's something required between the parentheses, then you would also put that there. Now let's try running it again. Here are the IPS events, and you can see it just keeps going on and on and on and on. Now, you have to be careful about this sometimes in coding, because if you create a while loop that will never break, then you're going to create a huge error, right? So this has to be something that is reasonably going to break or isn't doing something unreasonable within the while loop. Just keep that in mind. Now, the second type of loop in Python, which we mentioned before, is called a for loop. And that is where for each item in some group of items, you conduct some action. Instead of doing it while something is true or false or some condition is met, there's going to be some group of objects, like let's say 10 switches. And for this group of 10 switches, for each switch in this group of switches, maybe you want to change the password or change some configuration. And that function will run until it's happened to each switch in the group, and then it will stop. We are not going to show that in this video. We're going to show it in a couple videos out just because we need to know another advanced concept to do it. But now you have the idea of a for loop planted in your head. The final thing I want to show you is the if-else statement. Let me try to think of a example that we could do. Okay, I thought of one. Again, we cannot really do this for real. Let's pretend that we are part of a company that is using two different ISPs. And let's pretend that maybe we have a primary ISP. And so we have this primary link to this ISP. And if this link goes down, reroute the traffic to this other ISP. Checks if primary link is up. If not, switch to ISP 2. And again, if I'm butchering this somehow, networking knowledge wise, don't come for me. I'm doing my best. I'm just a lowly developer. What do we do when we do this function? We have to define it with the def keyword, just like usual. So def, and then, I don't know. Again, don't come at me for these names. We're just gonna call it reroute traffic. Okay, there's probably a better name we could use, but we're doing that for learning. Reroute traffic. And we do need a value passed into this function, and that is the link being used, the primary link. And again, this is something that has to be passed into the program, which means that we want to define it elsewhere in the program. So I'm just gonna go above it here and say link state equals up. Actually, no. Maybe like link up equals true. Let's just do true false, right? Because I think that makes more sense. It's easier to check if it's either up or it's not. Again, if you do this for a living, feel free to comment. But okay, so we're gonna pass in the link. And so now we're gonna put our if else statement. If is the keyword here. That's one nice thing about doing these conditionals in Python, right? A while loop, you use while. A for loop, you use for. If else statement, you use if and then else. So if link up equals true. Now, why do we have that squiggly again? Because we're not creating a new variable here, we're referring to it. So let's do our equals because we're checking if it's actually true, not defining the variable. If link equals true, again, we're just gonna put a print statement because we don't actually know how to reroute the traffic. We haven't learned that in our coding class yet. Traffic is now rerouted to ISP2. And then elif is if you're gonna have more than two conditions. Else is if there's just two conditions. For this else statement, we basically don't want anything to happen, right? So we could just print something here too, like print traffic is going through ISP1, or we could use the pass keyword in Python, which is basically, it's like a placeholder that basically says do nothing. So if the link is up, oh, oops. We want to say if the link is false, right? We're rewriting the traffic if the link is not up. Sorry about that. So if the link is down, we are now going to reroute to ISP2, else do nothing, because everything's fine. We could return link, we could return the state of link, or we could return nothing. And now what do we have to do in order to run this? We have to call it. So reroute traffic, and then remember link, see how when I put the parentheses, it prompts me. Link can be type any. I did not define what data type this has to be, but it says, hey, we're expecting something here that is called link. For that value, we're going to use link up. Boom, no errors here, all is good. Now, it is only going to print this statement to the console if the value of link up is false, right? Because link is what's being passed in here. Link is what's being passed in here. It's saying, hey, you're gonna give me some value and we're gonna refer to that as link from now on. And then we're gonna check if link is false, right? I'm passing up link up, which we have up here. I'm passing that into the function. Link up is link. Again, this all takes practice, okay? It takes practice. It's not you just put it into your brain, blah, blah, blah. We're going through this right now so that you have an example, but you can easily watch this video more than once and you're going to need to practice. It is not going to sink in unless you do these functions yourself. They're really not. But I promise you will get to a point where you'll finally get it and then you'll be golden. You'll be making all kinds of crap. Anyway, it's only going to show this print statement if the link is not up. And right now it is up according to our code. So let's run this. Oh, hang on. We're still running the last function. All right, I had to kill that terminal. Okay, so what I can do is I could just erase this whole function so that I'm not dealing with it, but I don't want to erase our work, right? So I'm going to comment it out. Okay. And again, there's better ways of doing things, but I've shown you how to do just the pound sign for a comment. And you can see it all turns green now, so it's not going to be read by the program. Okay, so now let's try it again. Run it, and we see the sum of our two switches days uptime still, because that's still in our code, right? We never took that out. And we do not see anything else. So let's try changing the state of the link. Let's change the link up to false. Okay? Now that we've changed it to false, we should theoretically see that print statement because it's going down that function line by line, right? And as soon as it sees something that it matches, it stops. So it won't do nothing because it's going to stop right here at the if link equals false. Oh, hey, that applies to us. So let's run it. Boom. Traffic is now rerouted to ISP2. Guys, please do not give up. I am aware of how abstract this is still. I am trying to boil this down as simply as possible. I am going to walk you through it. We are going to go through this and build crap that matters in as simple a way as possible until you are comfortable with it. But please just know that this is confusing and doesn't make sense and is difficult for everyone starting out. And the only way you get over it is by letting yourself be dumb, quote unquote, be dumb, and practice it. Again, my first programming projects in school were things like making a calculator or making a student registration app. And I promise you, I sat stuck on the dumbest thing forever. I had to go through all these same things, learning what a variable is, learning what a function is, not realizing what dumb little mistakes I was making. And I'm just saying dumb to be dramatic. It's not dumb, but it is a rite of passage. And I promise you, I am taking you through as quickly as as possible to do cool things. So please do not give up on me. I believe you can do this. And please try to practice some either on your own or in the exercises that I'm going to put in the description eventually to make sure you've got this before moving on to the next video. Otherwise, we will not retain it. All right, take care.